The last thing my son ever said to me was, "Don't worry, Dad. I've got this." I watched his car disappear down our dusty driveway, never suspecting that his own wife had already set the timer on the bomb that would shatter our world. At his funeral, as the rain fell like a million tiny hammers on his casket, she handed me not a tissue but a folded legal notice. "You have 30 days to vacate the premises," she said, her voice as cold as the grave we were standing beside. This is my house now. The numbness that had cocooned me since the police knocked on my door shattered. For 70 years, I, Arthur Vale, had built a life of quiet integrity in this small town. I was the man people came to for a sturdy fence, a solid table, a fair price. My wife, Eleanor, was the soul of our home. After cancer stole her a decade ago, the light never quite returned. But our son, Michael, he was the engine that kept me going. At 45, he was my best friend, my business partner in the small construction firm we'd built from nothing, and the reason I got out of bed each morning. His death was a brutal, nonsensical theft. A sudden cardiac event, the coroner had scribbled in his preliminary report. But Michael was a bull of a man. He could shoulder a full sheet of drywall without a grunt. Just days before, we'd been laughing, planning an extension for old Mrs. Higgins's sunroom. The idea that his heart just stopped was a lie the universe was telling, and I felt it in my bones. The funeral was a blur of grim faces and muffled sobs. Our community, the people I'd broken bread with for half a century, gathered around me, their hands on my shoulder, their words a gentle, sorrowful murmur. And then there was Lillian, my daughter-in-law. She stood slightly apart, a vision of curated grief in a black designer, dress that probably cost more than my truck. While the pastor spoke of dust and spirit, I saw her out of the corner of my eye, discreetly checking the reflection in her polished thumbnail. She wasn't grieving. She was waiting. The moment the final amen faded, her fingers cold and sharp, dug into my arm. "That's enough, Arthur," she whispered, her breath a ghost against my ear. "The show's over. We need to talk." She steered me away from the comforting circle of friends, her grip unyielding. The wake at my house was a surreal affair. The familiar rooms, filled with the scent of casseroles and the low hum of condolences, felt alien. I sat in my worn leather armchair, the one Eleanor had always teased me about, and let the waves of sympathy wash over me without feeling a thing. I watched Lillian play the hostess, accepting platitudes with a perfectly timed, watery smile. But her eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, were already inventorying the place. They lingered on the antique clock Eleanor's mother had left us, on the solid oak bookshelves I'd built with my own hands. Finally, the last guest drifted out, offering one final, helpless squeeze of my hand. The door clicked shut, and the house fell into a silence so profound it felt like its own kind of death. The setting sun cast long, skeletal shadows across the floorboards. I was exhausted, my soul feeling thin and frayed. All I wanted was the merciful oblivion of sleep. Lillian walked in from the kitchen. She had already changed out of her funeral dress into tight jeans and a cashmere sweater. She looked relieved, unburdened. "Okay," she said, crossing her arms and leaning against the doorframe. "We can drop the act now." I looked up, the fog in my mind making her words sound distant and distorted. "Act?" "The grieving father routine," she said, her voice flat and devoid of any emotion. "It's served its purpose. Now we need to discuss your future. Or rather, your lack of one in this house." I tried to stand, my old knees protesting. "Lillian, please." "Not now, I can't." "I just buried my son." "I know," she replied, a flicker of impatience in her eyes. "And that's why now is the perfect time. I need you to stop crying, pack your bags, and get out." The words didn't just hang in the air. They physically struck me, driving the last bit of air from my lungs. "Get out?" "Get out," she repeated, her voice dropping to a vicious, deliberate whisper. "Yes, you have 30 days. Consider it a courtesy." "Lillian, what are you talking about?" I managed my voice a ragged thing. "This is my home. I built this place with Eleanor. We raised Michael here. Every nail, every board. She let out a short, derisive laugh that echoed cruelly in the quiet room. No, Arthur. Not anymore. She strode to the desk in the corner. Asterisk my asterisk desk and pulled out a folder. She slapped it down on the coffee table in front of me. The sound was like a gunshot. Michael signed this 6 weeks ago. A quitclaim deed. The house is mine now. All of it. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my reading glasses. The world had narrowed to that single sheet of paper. I saw the legal jargon, the lines for grantor and grantee. There was Michael's name, and next to it a signature. It was his, but it wasn't. The usually bold, confident strokes were weak, shaky. The "them" was a timid loop. The "L" trailed off as if the pen had run out of ink. I don't understand, I whispered, the paper rattling in my hand. Why would he do this? He would never— He was in debt, Lillian stated casually, examining a perfectly manicured nail. Deep, deep debt. The garage was failing. This was the only collateral he had to secure a loan for us. A lie, a bald-faced, audacious lie. I had co-signed the loan for Michael's auto shop, Vale and Son Repairs, 5 years ago. He had not only paid it off in 3, but had been turning a steady profit ever since. He was meticulous, just like his mother. He didn't have a reckless bone in his body. He wasn't in debt, I said, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. The shop is successful. He showed me the books. Oh, please, she scoffed, rolling her eyes. You really are a naive old man, aren't you? You have no idea what his life was like. You saw the Sunday afternoon version he trotted out for you. He was in trouble. I helped him and he gave me the house. It's that simple. He wouldn't do this, I insisted, the tremor in my hand spreading through my whole body. Not without talking to me. Not without a reason? Well, he did, she snapped, her patience evaporating. And now he's dead, which makes me the sole owner. And I'm selling this sentimental little dump. I need the liquidity. So you have 30 days? Pack your memories and go. 30 days? The words were a breathless echo. 30 days, she repeated, leaning in so close I could smell her expensive floral perfume. And if you're not out by then, I will call the sheriff and have you removed for trespassing. Do you understand me, old man? I looked at her. I truly looked at her. This woman who had shared holidays with us, who had eaten at our table, who had smiled and called me Dad. She had waited until the dirt was fresh on her husband's grave to reveal the predator she had always been. I thought of the shaky signature, her impatience at the cemetery, the lie about the debt. And in that instant, the paralyzing grief that had consumed me underwent a fundamental change. It didn't vanish. It transformed. It crystallized, hardening from a suffocating fog into a core of pure, diamond-hard ice in my chest. The shaking in my hands stopped. My spine straightened. I looked up from the fraudulent paper and met her gaze. She was expecting tears. She was expecting begging. She was ready for a fight. I simply nodded, my face an emotionless mask. All right, Lillian. She blinked, thrown completely off balance. All right? Just like that? If that's what the paper says, I said, my voice flat and empty, then that's what it is. Good, she said, trying to regain her composure. She looked relieved but deeply confused. So, 30 days. I want you out by the 1st of the month. I shook my head slowly. I don't need 30 days. I turned and walked past her down the short hall to my bedroom. She followed me, her brow furrowed. What are you talking about? I went to my closet. I pushed past the flannel shirts and worn work pants. In the very back, behind a box of Eleanor's old letters, was a small weathered leather satchel. It was my go bag, the one I kept packed for spontaneous fishing trips to Lake Serene. I pulled it out and placed it on the bed. Lillian's eyes widened in disbelief. What? What is this? Were you planning on leaving? I zipped the bag. It was already packed with a change of clothes, my shaving kit, and a small, locked metal box. I walked back into the living room, the satchel swinging lightly from my hand. Lillian, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Yet it seemed to fill the entire house. You have no idea what you've just done. I walked to the front door. Wait. She yelled, and for the first time, I heard a genuine flicker of panic. Where are you going? You can't just leave. What am I supposed to tell people? I stopped, my hand on the cool brass of the doorknob. I turned and looked back at her. Standing in the middle of the living room my love had built, a room she had just claimed with a lie. I have things to do, I said. And I gave her a small, sad smile that didn't reach my eyes. I stepped out onto the porch, into the cool night air. The scent of rain-washed earth filled my lungs. I pulled the door shut behind me, the familiar heavy click of the latch was the sound of a chapter ending. I didn't look back. A moment later, I heard the distinct, metallic slide of the deadbolt being thrown from the inside. Then, faintly, I heard her laugh. It was a high-pitched, victorious sound that slithered through the closed door. Fine. Good riddance. She thought she had won. She thought the heartbroken old man was broken, wandering off into the darkness to be consumed by his sorrow. She had no idea that I wasn't wandering. I was marching. I was a man with a destination. A man with a plan. She thought she had just inherited a simple 3-bedroom house. She had no clue she had just declared war on a man who secretly owned half the county. I didn't go to the police, not yet. That would come later. I had a much more important first stop to make. But before I found a room in a clean, quiet motel on the outskirts of town, I did make one phone call. I pulled a burn phone from my satchel, a relic from a more cautious time that now felt prescient. I dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang twice. The Diana Reid, the voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and instantly calming. Diana, it's Arthur Vale. There was a slight pause. Arthur. I heard about Michael. I'm so sorry. There are no words. Thank you, I said, my voice rough, but I'm not calling for condolences. I need your help. It's about Lillian. I told her everything. The eviction, the forged deed, the threat, the look in her eyes. Diana listened without interruption, a silent, attentive witness to my devastation. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice now sharpened to a fine point. Go to the Oakwood Motel, get a room. Get some sleep, Arthur. I'll handle the morning. And she did. Lillian probably slept better than she had in years. There in my bed, in the bed I had shared with Eleanor, she must have woken up feeling like a queen, the master of her tiny, stolen domain. She probably imagined I was curled up on a park bench, a broken, penniless old man with nowhere to go. I can picture her that morning, walking through my house, running her hands over the furniture, mentally calculating the resale value of every heirloom. She would have made coffee in my kitchen, used Eleanor's favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle that Michael made her in pottery class. She sat at the table I built and made the call she'd been dreaming of. Yes, hello. Is this Premier Realty? I'd like to list a property for immediate sale. It's a charming bungalow on Maple Street. Yes, completely vacant as of last night. The previous occupant is gone. Gone, just like that. As if I were a piece of clutter she'd finally managed to discard. She was probably smiling, imagining the money hitting her account when the knock came. It wasn't the gentle tap of a neighbor bringing a pie. It was the kind of knock that resonates in your bones. 3 heavy, solid, authoritative blows on the front door. Annoyed, she likely stomped to the door, ready to shoo away whatever interruption had come. She swung it open. 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies stood on my porch. Deputy Miller, a man with a face that had seen too much of the town's darkness, and Deputy Evans, a woman whose sharp eyes missed nothing. Ma'am, Deputy Miller said, his voice a low rumble. We're looking for an Arthur Vale. Lillian's smile was a masterpiece of smug arrogance. She leaned against the doorframe, the picture of the new homeowner. He's not here? He left last night. I'm the owner of this property now. Can I help you with something, officers? Deputy Evans's gaze swept past Lillian, taking in the living room before returning to her face. New owner. That's interesting. Lillian's smile tightened. Is there a problem? There might be, Deputy Evans said, pulling out her notebook. We received a formal complaint from Mr. Vale's legal representation this morning. The complaint is for illegal entry, trespassing, and unlawful occupation of this address. I was told later that the blood drained from Lillian's face so fast it was audible. Illegal entry? She sputtered. What are you talking about? This is my house. My late husband left it to me. I live here. She was starting to sound hysterical. I'm sure my neighbor, old Mr. Gable, was watching from behind his curtains. Good. Deputy Miller held up a placating hand. Ma'am, we're just here to document the situation regarding the occupation. But that's not the only reason we're here. Lillian froze. I can see her now, her hand gripping the door, her knuckles white. What? What other reason? Deputy Miller looked down at his clipboard. We also received a formal request, filed this morning, citing new evidence to open an investigation into the suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of Mr. Michael Vale. That was the kill shot. Lillian stumbled back a step, grabbing the door jamb for support. Her face, the deputies later reported, went from white to a sickly gray. Suspicious? She whispered, the word barely escaping her lips. It was a heart attack. The doctor said so? That's what the initial report indicates. Ma'am, Deputy Evans said, her voice like polished steel. But Mr. Vale's attorney seems to believe otherwise. We'll need to ask you a few questions. And ma'am, she added, her eyes locking onto Lillian's, you probably shouldn't try to sell this house. It's considered part of an active investigation now. Lillian didn't say another word. She just stared, her mind racing, finally understanding. The old man hadn't wandered off to die. The old man had called his lawyer. The old man was fighting back. I wasn't at the station. I wasn't filling out forms. I was sitting 20 floors above the city in the sleek, modern offices of Reed and Associates. The world below looked small and orderly, a stark contrast to the chaos in my heart. I sat in a deep leather chair, holding a cup of herbal tea I didn't want. My hands were perfectly steady. Across the desk sat Diana Reed, at 45. She was the sharpest legal mind I had ever known, a woman whose elegance was matched only by her ferocity. She was my attorney, my financial manager, and the executor of my wife's most sacred wish. She hung up her phone, her movements precise. It's done, she said. The deputies are on her porch right now, just as we discussed. A preliminary visit? No arrests yet? I nodded, taking a slow sip of the tea, chamomile. Diana, new caffeine was the last thing I needed. She had a paper, I said, my voice quiet. She said Michael signed the house over to her. 6 weeks ago, I looked at her, the question I was terrified to ask hanging in the air between us. Did he, Diana? Did my boy really do it? Diana didn't answer immediately. She turned to her large monitor, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I've been busy since you called me from the motel. Arthur, a document appeared on the screen. It was the quitclaim deed. Michael emailed me a scan of this document last week. My heart plummeted. So he did sign it? Hold on, she said, clicking her mouse. 2 more documents appeared side by side with the deed. One was Michael's signature from his business license. The other was from his driver's license. I sent the scan to our forensic document examiner first thing this morning. He just sent his report back. I leaned forward. I didn't need to be an expert to see it. The signature on the deed was timid, the lines wavering. The real signatures were bold, assertive, and fluid. It's a forgery, Arthur, Diana said softly. A terrible one, according to our examiner. He said it shows clear signs of tracing, likely by someone with a nervous hand. A wave of something cold and dark washed over me. It wasn't relief. It was the chilling confirmation of a betrayal far deeper than I had imagined. So she forged his name. She tried to steal the house. Yes, Diana said. She did. She closed the file. But that's not even the most important part, Arthur. I looked at her, confused. What could be more important than fraud? Diana leaned back, steepling her fingers. Do you remember the promise you made to Eleanor, Arthur? In that hospital room, right before she passed? How could I forget? Eleanor, so frail, yet her eyes burning with a fierce light, gripping my hand. Arthur, we built this from sweat and dreams. Don't you let some pretty face with a hollow heart tear it all down? You protect our boy. You protect our legacy. I remember every word, I whispered. She was always right, wasn't she? Diana allowed herself a small, grim smile. She saw Lillian coming from a mile away. Which is why it doesn't matter if that signature was real. It doesn't matter if Michael signed that paper 1,000 times. I frowned. Diana, I don't understand. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a massive, leather-bound document. She slid it across the polished desk towards me. Embossed in gold on the cover were the words, "The Eleanor Vale Trust." "We set this up the week after Eleanor's funeral," Diana said. "You were in a fog of grief, but you signed the papers. We transferred every single asset, every deed, every stock, every parcel of land we ever bought." She tapped the cover with a perfectly manicured finger. "Including the bungalow on Maple Street. Arthur, you legally own nothing but clothes on your back and the personal checking account I manage for you. You haven't owned that house in 10 years. The Eleanor Vale Trust owns it, and I am the executor." A slow, cold understanding began to dawn on me, thawing the ice in my chest just enough to let a new, terrifying reality seep in. "So, even if Michael had signed it, it would be a worthless piece of paper," Diana finished. "You cannot give away what you do not own. Michael knew about the trust, Arthur. He sat right here in this office with us when we explained it. He knew he was a beneficiary, not the owner. He knew everything was protected. So Lillian? She just tried to steal something that Michael couldn't even give her. She's not just cruel, Arthur. She's profoundly ignorant. She was so fixated on the one little house she could see. She never bothered to look at the foundation it was built on." I sat back, the weight of this revelation settling on me. The legal victory was absolute. Lillian was exposed as a fool and a fraud. But the relief I expected was again replaced by a darker, more insidious question. "But Diana," I said slowly, turning to look out at the sprawling city, "that doesn't make any sense." "What part?" "Michael, my son. He knew the paper was worthless. He knew about the trust. He was my heir. He was going to inherit everything." I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto hers. "So why would he be confused about a document he knew was fraudulent? Why would he even send you that scan last week unless—" Diana's professional mask slipped. She knew exactly where my mind was going. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a grave, serious tone. "That, Arthur," she said, "is the $20 million question. The number hung in the air between us. The true, consolidated value of the Eleanor Vale Trust. That's the question I've been asking myself all morning," she continued. "Why would he do something so illogical? Why would he be scared of a document he knew had no power?" She paused, letting the silence stretch, forcing me to connect the last, terrible dot. My blood ran cold. "Unless," I whispered. "Unless he didn't forge it," Diana said, her voice like ice. "Unless Lillian forged it, thinking Michael owned the house and he found out. Unless he sent me that scan because he was terrified. Unless he knew something was very, very wrong." She stood up and walked to the window, standing beside me, shoulder to shoulder, looking down at the city we had both, in our own ways, helped build. "It's all connected, Arthur. The fake signature, the invented debt, the desperate attempt to grab the one asset she thought she could control." She turned to face me, her eyes filled with a cold fire I had only ever seen in Eleanor. "It's all connected to the sudden, convenient, and very timely heart attack of a healthy 45-year-old man. She didn't just want the house, Arthur," Diana said, her final words striking with the force of a physical blow. "She wanted it all. And Michael, your son, was just in her way." The conference room in Diana's office was designed to convey power and unshakable authority. One entire wall was glass, offering a panoramic view of the city. The table was a single slab of obsidian black marble, polished to a mirror finish. Lillian and her lawyer, a man named Robert Shaw, sat on one side. Shaw wore a suit that was a little too flashy, and he had the overconfident swagger of a man who thinks he's the smartest person in the room, especially when he believes he's about to crush a grieving senior. Lillian was back in her grieving widow costume, a simple, modest black dress, a tissue clutched in her hand. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I sat opposite them, silent. Diana Hess sat at the head of the table, her files arranged in 3 neat, intimidating stacks. Robert Shaw cleared his throat, a loud, performative sound. "Let's not waste anyone's time," he began, sliding a copy of the quitclaim deed across the gleaming table. It stopped directly in front of me. "My client, Mrs. Lillian Vale, is the legal and rightful owner of the property at 121 Maple Street. This deed, signed by her late husband, is incontrovertible proof." He leaned back, lacing his fingers over his stomach. "Frankly, we are appalled. We understand you're grieving, Mr. Vale, but using that grief to harass a widow is despicable." Lillian let out a perfectly timed, delicate sob into her tissue. "We are here as a courtesy," Shaw continued, his voice oozing false sympathy. "We don't want to add to your pain, but my client has been subjected to police harassment at her own home based on your false claims. That ends today. If this continues, we will sue you for emotional distress and seek a restraining order." He spread his hands wide. "What do you have to say for yourself?" I didn't say a word. I just looked at him, my expression unreadable. Diana smiled. It was a cold, polite, razor-sharp smile that never touched her eyes. "Thank you for that presentation, Mr. Shaw. I do appreciate the theater. Now, let's discuss facts." She slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "This," she said, "is an affidavit from Mr. David Chun, a board-certified forensic document examiner. He has already been retained as our expert witness." Shaw's smug look faltered. He picked up the paper. "We can get our own expert." "Oh, I insist you do," Diana said, her smile widening. "Please have your expert analyze the ink deposition. Have him note the hesitation marks on the downstroke of the M. Have him examine the pressure patterns, which clearly indicate a slow, deliberate tracing motion, not a natural, fluid signature." Lillian's composure cracked. Michael was stressed. His hand was shaky. Diana raised a single, perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Was he stressed 6 weeks ago, when his employees gave statements saying he was hoisting transmission blocks with ease? They said he was in perfect health. She leaned forward slightly. "No, the signature on this deed is a forgery. And according to Mr. Chun, it's a very, very bad one." Robert Shaw scoffed, but a bead of sweat was now visible on his temple. "That's a bold accusation. You can't prove it." "That's the fascinating part, Mr. Shaw," Diana said, her voice bright and deadly. "We don't have to." Shaw looked utterly lost. "What?" "I said we don't have to prove it's a forgery. I'll save you the cost of your own expert, because even if that signature were 100% genuine, even if Michael Vale descended from heaven and signed it at this very table, it would be utterly worthless." Shaw was pale. "What are you talking about?" Diana reached down and placed the heavy, leather-bound trust document on the table with a resonant asterisk thud dot asterisk. "This," she said, tapping the cover, "is the Eleanor Vale Trust. It was established 10 years ago, Mr. Arthur. Vale does not personally own that bungalow. He hasn't owned it for a decade. The trust owns the property. And as its executor, I can tell you it is not, and never was, for sale." Shaw's jaw went slack. He frantically shuffled through his own papers. "That's not possible. The title search listed Arthur and Eleanor Vale." "A common error for an inattentive lawyer," Diana said, all pretense of politeness gone. "You ran a basic online search? You didn't check the transfer of assets into the trust, filed under County Docket 88,741. It's public record. Had you done your due diligence, you would have known your client's deed is meaningless." Shaw looked at Lillian, his face a mask of dawning horror and panic. He had just realized his client had lied to him and led him into professional humiliation. He stammered, "A trust? What trust? He's a retired carpenter." Lillian could no longer contain herself. The act, the fake grief, the smugness, it all shattered. She shot to her feet, her chair screeching backwards. "He's right," she shrieked, her voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. The real Lillian was now on full display. "A trust fund? You're lying." She pointed a trembling, red-taloned finger at me. I still hadn't spoken a word. "He's just an old man. A retired nobody. He lives in that dump. He wears flannel shirts. He doesn't have a trust fund. Diana Hayes did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. She let Lillian's scream fade into a stunned, heavy silence. Robert Shaw, the flashy lawyer, was completely defeated. He looked back and forth between his hysterical client and my impeccably calm attorney. "This is, if you have a trust, we demand to see the documentation." Diana simply crossed her arms. "Oh, Mr. Shaw," she said, her voice dripping with pity. "You still don't understand, do you? You're still stuck on the house. You're still thinking like a small-town ambulance chaser. You think this is about one little bungalow?" She shook her head, a slow, sad motion. "Your client just screamed that Mr. Vale is a retired carpenter." "She's right." "He is. He's very proud of the work he did with his hands." She turned her gaze to Lillian, who was still standing, panting, her face blotchy with rage. "Lillian, you've been in this town for, 5 years? You see the old buildings, you see the quiet streets. You never bothered to ask who owned the land before it was worth anything. Arthur and his wife, Eleanor, started buying property in this county when it was just farmland and dirt tracks. They believed in this community. They didn't just work in it. They invested in it." Diana began ticking points off on her fingers. "As of this morning, the Eleanor Vale Trust holds the deeds to 4 large commercial warehouses on the industrial park. It owns the 12-acre plot that the new elementary school is being built on. It also," she paused, gesturing around the opulent room, "owns the land this entire business complex is built on. Asterisk we asterisk are asterisk his asterisk tenants." Lillian's face went from red to a sickly, chalky white. Her knees seemed to buckle. Robert Shaw made a small, choking sound. I had been silent this entire time. I had watched this woman who married my son, who checked her reflection at his funeral, who tried to throw me out of my home. I watched her realize the truth. Now it was my turn. I leaned forward, placing my hands a carpenter's hands, rough and calloused flat on the polished marble table. It was the first time I had spoken. My voice was quiet, but in the dead silence of that room it was deafening. "We live simply," I said. Lillian flinched as if I'd shouted. "My wife Eleanor and I, we didn't believe in showing off. We didn't wear fancy clothes. We didn't drive expensive cars. We didn't need to. We believed in building. We believed in work." I looked directly into Lillian's wide, terrified eyes. My son, Michael, he knew this. He knew all of it. I was teaching him how to manage the portfolio, how to read the ledgers, how to be a good steward of what his mother and I had built. I let the next words land with the weight of an anvil. He was my heir. The heir left the room. He was in training to take over the entire estate, a portfolio valued at just over $20 million. Thump. Lillian didn't just sit down. She collapsed. She fell back into her chair, her mouth agape, a soundless O of pure, unadulterated shock. All the fight, all the venom vanished. $20 million. She had been married to a $20 million heir, and she never knew. She had been so focused on stealing his car that she never realized he owned the entire dealership. She had tried to forge a deed for a $300,000 house, not knowing he was set to inherit an empire. The look on her face wasn't just shock. It was the agonizing realization of a lifetime of greed understanding, the monumental scale of what it had missed. Robert Shaw was just staring at me, his legal pad forgotten. He looked like he was going to be sick. "So, you see," Diana continued, her voice sharp and clear, picking up right where I left off, "we really don't care about that little house on Maple Street. You can't have it. Obviously, the trust will be taking possession by the end of the day. But the house," she waved a dismissive hand, "is no longer the point." Lillian looked up, confused, her mind still reeling from the numbers. "What? What's the point?" Diana leaned all the way across the table, her eyes like chips of black ice. "The point," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried to every corner of the room, "is that we are very, very interested in why you felt the need to forge your husband's signature. We are very interested in why you lied to your own lawyer about non-existent debts. And we are extremely interested. Her voice became so quiet we had to strain to hear it. And why my client's son, a perfectly healthy 45-year-old man, suddenly and mysteriously died of a heart attack right after you realized you couldn't get your hands on his money. The panic that flashed across Lillian's face was no longer about money. It was about something else entirely. It was the pure, unadulterated terror of being caught. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, grabbing for her purse, her eyes darting towards the door. His death was a tragedy. It was an accident. It was his heart. The meeting ended with Shaw practically dragging a catatonic Lillian from the room. They didn't speak. They just fled. In the quiet that followed, Diana and I hired an investigator, a former state trooper named Frank Briggs. His report was devastating. Lillian wasn't just in debt. She was drowning in over $250,000 of gambling losses, owed to a ruthless loan shark operating out of a nearby city. Security footage from a convenience store the night Michael died showed them in a violent argument in his car. He was throwing a thick stack of papers at her. Frank discovered what they were: divorce papers, filed by Michael just 2 days prior, and a new will, leaving everything to me and disinheriting Lillian completely. She knew she was being cut off, left with nothing but her crushing debts. She had been handed her motive for murder. Cornered, Lillian played her final, desperate card. She went to the local media, painting herself as the victim of a powerful, wealthy father-in-law. She gave a tearful interview, manipulating public sentiment, trying to win in the court of public opinion since she had already lost in the court of law. We didn't respond on the news. Diana's advice was perfect. Let her talk. "She's just building our perjury case," we responded where it mattered, in a courtroom. During a hearing she had forced to try and claim the house, Diana systematically dismantled her. She presented the forged deed analysis, the divorce papers, the new will, and the evidence of Lillian's massive gambling debts. And then she presented the final piece of evidence we had petitioned the court for, the full official autopsy report. "Your Honor," Diana announced, her voice clear and resonant in the packed courtroom, "Michael Vale did not die of a heart attack. His heart was perfectly healthy. He died from prolonged, low-dose ingestion of digoxin, a hot medication he was not prescribed, administered over several weeks, leading to a fatal, predictable cardiac arrest." Lillian screamed, a raw, animal sound of pure, exposed guilt as the bailiffs moved in to arrest her for first-degree murder. The victory was hollow. It didn't bring my son back, but it brought a terrible, necessary peace. Weeks later, I was finally able to return home. The silence was different now. It was no longer filled with grief, but with possibility. Diana met me there. On the kitchen table, I had spread out new blueprints. Not for a house, but for the Michael Vale Foundation, a state-of-the-art vocational school where young people could learn skilled trades for free. "It's what Eleanor would have wanted," I told Diana. "It's what Michael would have loved. We spent a lifetime building assets. Now it's time to build futures." The story of the quiet old man and the greedy daughter-in-law became a local legend, a cautionary tale. But for me, it was a lesson in the true nature of strength and legacy. It's never about the noise you make, but the foundations you lay in silence. Greed is always its own undoing, while integrity and patience are the seeds of a legacy that can outlast us all. If this story of betrayal, justice, and rebuilding resonated with you, if it reminded you that the quietest people often have the strongest resolve, then I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe in standing up for what's right, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of truth and consequence. Your support helps share these important lessons with the world.